Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call your director's meeting for the Open Space Authority to order. It is 6:30 p.m. Call roll.
Director Kenneth.
Here.
Director Chapman.
Here.
Director Sutherland. Here. Director Alexander.
Here.
Director Potter.
Here.
Director Gill.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not my most favorite part of this meeting, but I do want to let the board know that we will formally adjourn the meeting tonight in honor of Director Mike Flaher. Very difficult to not see him here with us tonight. And I understand that do we have anybody that's attending in person or in Zoom? We do. Okay. So want to make sure that everyone feels welcome, and that if you'd like to say a few words, we invite you to come up and speak.
I first got to know Mike when he was championing the Berryessa Creek Trail. There were some problems with water, and he was just tenacious in his efforts to work with the different agencies to get some improvements in the waterway there so that the trail as it passed under 280 would be usable rather than totally flooded or having encampments under there. And so when he first came to the OSA, it was just so exciting because you knew that you had a true trooper to be out there carrying the word about the Open Space Authority, and also in taking a deep look at whatever actions that the board was going to undertake. So I'm sure that for our staff, it was a challenge sometimes because he always has questions or statements about where he thought we should look and what we should be doing. So as a past member of the board, I just want to say deeply miss him. And I want to compliment staff on their release that they prepared, acknowledging all of the service that he's been to the agency. So thank you for giving me this moment to speak.
If there are any members on Zoom joining us, you can speak right now. Or raise your hand. Margie Matthews, raise your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to attend the meeting tonight, and I'm glad that it's being adjourned in honor of Mike. I met Mike probably 10 years ago when I was appointed as an interim council member for the city of San Jose, a post I had held 20 years earlier than that. But I had been doing other things. And as soon as I met Mike, I knew I had to hire him to help me with this position. He was very connected to the Berryessa community. He was an open space and parks advocate. He was a builder of alliances for open space and creeks, and he particularly was interested in Penitencia Creek Park and the Penitencia Creek Trail and the Ridge Trail and the Bay Trail. All of those things I was interested in too. So he was a wonderful addition to my staff for the short time that I was there. He educated me, and he made me he made me even more of a parks advocate than I already was. So I was very sorry to hear of his passing. My highest regards for him and to his family. And I'm glad I was able to join the meeting tonight.
Thank you both very much for the kind words. Mike, I do believe we intend to honor Mike at our March 27th meeting, do a more formal resolution, with the board. Mark, I believe you have 2 words you want to say?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Mark Landgraf, Assistant General Manager. I wanted to read into the public record a statement that we issued on Monday about Director Flaher. The Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority announces the passing of Mike Flaher, Director of District 2, on Saturday, February 22nd. Director Flaher represented communities from North San Jose, Berryessa, and the city of Milpitas since 2014. All of us at the authority are greatly saddened by Mike's passing and will miss his sense of duty as a board member. Mike was a terrific partner in getting things done, said Helen Chapman, District 3 Director for the authority and current board chair for the public agency. No matter how complex the issue, he focused on the work and on fulfilling his own personal commitment to protecting the environment, raising awareness, and involving his community in building equitable access to nature. He championed these values in all the organizations he served. Throughout his extensive public service career, Flaher held leadership roles in various organizations, including the Bay Area Ridge Trail Council, Berryessa Citizens Advisory Council, Berryessa Business Association, Santa Clara County Parks and Recreation Volunteer Coordinating Committee, and the City of San Jose Parks and Recreation and Neighborhood Services Commission. Flaher also worked with former San Jose City Council member Marjorie Matthews, from whom we just heard. An Air Force veteran, Flaher served in the Air Force Reserves for 15 years and worked for National Semiconductor for 20 years. It's been such an honor to work with Mike Flaher over the years as he fought for parks, trails, and environmental health for the residents of North San Jose. It saddens me deeply that we will no longer have his advocacy day to day, though his spirit will always be present as we walk the trails, said David Cohen, San Jose District 4 council member. Flaher's many years of service to the authority will be publicly honored at a future board meeting. The Open Space Authority Board of Directors will decide whether to vote to fill the District 2 vacancy through a special election or by appointment. As we remember Mike Flaher, we honor his legacy of service and the positive impact he has had on his community, said Andrea McKenzie, General Manager of the authority. His vision and efforts will guide us as we work to continue connecting the communities we serve to the open spaces he so dearly cherished. All of us at the Open Space Authority extend our condolences to Mike's wife, April, and their family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. At this point, any board members want to say a few words? Director Seven.
Thank you. I met Mike many years ago when he was involved with the city of San Jose and the Parks Department. And I've never met anybody more committed to making sure that we all have good open space. I also had the pleasure of serving with him on the Citizens Advisory Committee, where he was there for just a short time before he was elevated to the board. And so I've known Mike for many years. I've never doubted his commitment to preserving open space and the great work that this organization does. But the other thing I know about Mike is how deeply he cared for his wife, April, and his family. When you were talking with him, no matter what, she would come up. And so, in the most loving and generous way. And so, April, thank you for sharing all this.
I'm feeling a little lonely over here, needless to say, but Mike, I think was the most altruistic person I've ever known. He really was all about what he was doing and what he cared for. And always had a sense of seeing another view, making sure that all views, typical engineer thought, that he was always making sure all the Ts were crossed and the Is were dotted, and it sure helped me make decisions, and I really will miss him.
First of all, Mike and I actually, he's sitting on that side of the table and I'm sitting on the other side of the table. I really miss him. I personally, I'm deeply, actually, I don't have any wording to say anything, but we lost him. And there, whatever he done for the authority is really credible, incredible. Nobody can fill his seat. But my heartfelt condolence with his family. There is no doubt in my mind, Mike will be remembered for his noble work, the work he done during his life, especially for the open space authority. I cannot say more than that at this time. I can say only, Mike, rest in peace.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, Mike, I always thought of him first and foremost as Ridge Trail Mike, because that's what he seemed to, want to work on all the time. And we first met when he joined the CAC, and then he never stopped talking to me about the Ridge Trail and ways to connect it with BART and all the way up to the top of the mountain. So, he served our community, his state, nation. I think he was happiest when I knew him when he was working with Councilmember Matthews, and in the thick of all the things he'd seen from the outside, and now he was on the inside. My sympathies are with his family. His lasting legacy will be these trails and the work of the Open Space Authority.
As one of the newer board members, I have to say that Mike was always really helpful and welcoming to me on the board. And then as I got to know him better, I grew to really admire him for his commitment to his family, his involvement in the community, which seemed very extensive, and his love of the Open Space Authority and the Bay Area Ridge Trail. And I'm a hiker myself, and I'm starting to do a lot more of the circumnavigating of the Bay Area Ridge Trail. And it was great to be able to talk to Mike about it and see his enthusiasm and see all the work that he'd done for it. So I appreciate the work with the Open Space Authority and with the Ridge Trail and in the community in general. And my heart goes out to his family.
I got to serve with Mike twice in two official capacities. One as the park commissioner, and then again here on the board of directors. Mike was dogged when we were on the park commission, the city, and I don't know if you know this, I've told a few people, but he worked alongside me when I was chair, and we worked to get the park fees raised in the city of San Jose, which is a Herculean effort these days. Back then we did it. But we brought in millions of dollars by getting the fees adjusted. The other thing he did is he came up with a silly suggestion. Mackinac County has a volunteer coordinator. Why doesn't the city of San Jose have one? So we worked on getting a volunteer coordinator established with the city of San Jose. But he was a giant. He did some incredible things that have a lasting legacy on the city in terms of open space. I will deeply, deeply miss his compassion and his dedication for open space and for this body. He loved all of everybody here. Thank you. Andrea, did you have a few words?
Yeah, I'm gonna save most of what I want to say for our March 27th agenda item honoring Mike, but I do want to say, and Garnetta, you kind of prompted this. Mike was a very involved board member. He usually came early and he stayed late, especially on board nights. And he always wanted to come early and get my ear
and share some of his wisdom from his many years and involvement across many different types of organizations and agencies. And I will miss him as an advisor. As our chair, Helen Chapman, said, we'll be officially honoring Mike at the March 27th board meeting. And there are a lot of conversations going on in the community right now because Director Flauher knew a lot of people. And so we are in conversation with city council members, Bay Area Ridge Trail Council, the county, and the Berryessa community on appropriate ways to honor Mike. So we'll be pursuing that in the coming weeks and months. But thank you very much, Madam Chair.
So this portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the board on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Do we have any addressing the board under public comments?
If there are any guests joining us via Zoom who would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand.
All right, then announcement regarding the items to be discussed in closed session will be made prior to closed session.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's one item in closed session tonight, conference with general counsel, existing litigation pursuant to government code section 54956.9 D1, Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority versus Andrade, case number 23 CV 426482.
Okay, thank you. All right, we will return to closed session. Is there a report from closed session?
No report, Madam Chair.
All right, we will now move on to the approval of the January 23rd meeting minutes.
I'll move to approve.
Second. Thank you. I'd like to just ask for a correction on page 3 of 3, where you list the committees that we're on. For the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency, I think I'm the alternate. Should be called out alternate. Not the, because otherwise.
I'll approve as amended.
So we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended with a motion by Director Kennett with a second by Director Alexander. Oh, wait. Last code, it's you. Well, that's correct. Yes, that should be left.
Can you repeat that?
On the LAFCO designation, I should not be listed as alternate. Director Alexander should be alternate. So, flip it. Sorry. Okay, so go back, so we only have 2 other corrections that we have on the meeting minutes. Okay. Ready for roll call?
Director Kennett,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Sutherland,
Yes.
Director Alexander,
Yes.
Director Potter,
Yes.
Director Gill.
Yes.
That motion approved, minutes as amended, passed unanimously. All right, now you're on to the approval of the consent calendar. For any board member that wish to pull any item from consent.
Move to approve.
So. We have a motion to approve. And Director Gale with the second by Director Kent. Yes.
Thank you, and I'm sorry. I just wanted to point out that the one report that had both of the different years, here's the prices we charged, and then here's the prices we're gonna charge. That was so helpful, but not all of them did. So I'm wondering if the next time, this is approving the increases in the hourly rate. If that could be. It's on page 2 of 2, table 1, table 1. It's Xander Westbrook Design. It lists the 2021 rate and the 2025 rate. The other proposed changes didn't do it that way, but it was just so easy to see what the difference was, and that it's very minor over the course of 4 years. So I just wanted to say that I really did like it formatted like this. Thank you.
Director Kennett,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Sutherland,
Yes.
Director Alexander,
Yes.
Director Potter,
Yes.
Director Gill.
Yes.
Okay, so that's times 1 through 6. Passing unanimously. All right, now we are on to new business. And which is to approve appointment of Dennis Watson to the expenditure plan oversight committee. To the oversight committee for a term ending on December 31st, 2027. Carolyn?
I'm going to take that from my seat. if you don't mind. Hello, I'm Caroline Hernandez, clerk of the board for the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority, and for tonight's item, we will be recommending. Oops, I'm sorry. The clerk doesn't know what she's doing. I'm just gonna- Staff recommends that the Board of Directors appoint Dennis Watson to the Expenditure Plan Oversight Committee to complete the remainder of a 4-year term ending on December 31st, 2027. The Expenditure Plan Oversight Committee, or EPOC, is a 7-member committee appointed by the Board of Directors. Each seat serves a 4-year term and must meet the following requirements. Each committee member shall be a resident within the authority's jurisdiction and at least 18 years of age, is neither an elected official of any government nor employee from any agency or organization that directly benefits financially from the proceeds of the parcel tax, and is neither a member of the authority's board, CAC, nor paid staff. Interested persons are asked to complete and sign the application, submit a supplemental questionnaire, and provide a resume for the committee's review. Mr. Watson submitted a completed application, resume, and answers to the questionnaire to the authority on November 24th, 2024. And you can find his application and supplemental documents in your packet under Exhibit F. Along with meeting the general criteria, Mr. Watson's qualifications also include 50 years of service in the banking and financial sector. Mr. Watson appeared before the EPOC at their first meeting of the year on January 21st, 2025, to introduce himself and answer questions regarding his interests and qualifications. The EPOC committee voted 4-0 to recommend Mr. Watson's application to the board for approval.
Let me ask the motion.
Yes.
Why is a 4-0?
Uh,
How many members are there?
It is a 7-member committee
Yeah.
with 4 sitting members. So we have 3 vacancies.
Oh, that's fine. Excellent.
We did.
And now I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. All right, does anybody have any questions? Director Gilly, what was your question? Director Potter? Alexander? No, anybody? No? Okay. All right, then we are looking for a motion.
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay. Wonderful. So we have a motion to approve. Yeah, motion to approve the appointment of Dennis Watson, moved by Director Alexander with a second by Director Kenneth.
Do you want to invite any questions from the public?
Oh, yes. Do we have any, there any public comment before we finish the motion?
There are none.
Okay.
Okay, Director Kenneth,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Sutherland,
Yes.
Director Alexander,
Yes,
Director Potter,
Yes.
Director Gill.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, next item is we are going to review 2 at-large applications to the Citizens Advisory Committee and appoint 1 applicant to the vacant at-large position for a term ending on June 30th, 2025.
Hello again, board. This is Caroline Hernandez, clerk of the board. And tonight, the recommendation is to review the application submitted by Beth Fricksdale and Mary Patterson and consider feedback from the Administration and Budget Committee and appoint 1 of the candidates to the at-large position to fill the remainder of a 2-year term ending on June 30th, 2025. The Citizens Advisory Committee is a 15-member committee comprised of 7 district representatives and 8 at-large representatives. The at-large position has been vacant since November 19th, following the departure of Kathy Sutherland, who assumed her role here on the board of directors. The selected applicant would fill the remainder of the current term and could request reappointment at the appropriate time per the guidelines of the CAC handbook. So our applicants, the first being Beth Fricksdale, a longtime San Jose resident with a background in California's agricultural systems and food production landscape with a 25-year career in the food industry. And her application is also in your packet. Next is Mary Patterson. The authority received her application on December 9th, 2024. And Mary is a 2-term elected member of the Morgan Hill Unified School Board District and a 24-year resident of San Jose. As part of the process for selection and appointment of at-large applicants, the CAC Handbook of Guidelines and Responsibilities states that the Administration and Budget Committee shall review all applications for at-large representatives, may interview the applicants, and shall recommend nominations for consideration and appointment by the board. On January 23rd, 2025, staff called a special meeting of the ABC to expedite the review of two applications. Those two applications received in December. Both candidates attended the meeting and spoke to their background and interest in serving on the CAC. And the ABC deemed both candidates qualified to fulfill the duties and decided to defer its recommendation and allow the full board to weigh in and decide on the appointment. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I'd also like to point out that Beth Rigsdale is here.
I wanted to just add a couple of just some clarification. So we have two very well qualified candidates, which, and you know that from last time, and thank you so much for coming back and going through this again with us. But as I understand it, there's another position, the CAC is going to have a vacancy in June.
Correct. One of our members, Steve Mink, announced in the January meeting that he did not plan to seek reappointment when his term ended in June.
So then my question is, we obviously will select somebody this evening, but I'm hoping that the application can remain on file for the second person so that we don't have to, have to reapply. It's there. And then the position becomes open and we go through the process and go through the same thing.
Correct. So yes, if we had another position on the CAC open up, we would revisit whomever candidate, just to make sure that they still wanted to serve. And I believe we would still have the ABC make a recommendation.
Okay, but the application we would still
We
hold on
would
to it, so
still
you
have
have
it.
to fill it out again.
Correct.
I asked, the city of San Jose does that with commission, they hold on to it for a certain amount of time. Okay, so, and the vacancy would get posted in April, May?
The vacancy for the open, so per our policies, what we do is in April, we give, any, members with expiring terms a 90-day notice. And at that point in time, we send out a memo. If there are district representatives, the board members are CC'd. I think even at-large board members are notified as well. And we ask if they are interested in seeking reappointment. And at that time, they either give us an affirmation via email or they decline the position. So they'll fulfill the remainder of their term. So at that point, we could post the vacancy.
Because I know sometimes we're doing it after the fact, but this time we would be proactive. Right?
Yes.
Thank you for answering all my questions. Okay, does any member of the board have a question for Beth? Or Jill?
I do.
Nope. Coach Kenneth.
Thank you.
You mentioned on your application that 25-year experience in the food industry. What is that experience? What aspect of the food industry?
Okay, I studied food science when I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo for my undergraduate and master's degree. And then since I graduated, I've been working for several different companies as a food scientist. And a lot of people actually haven't heard of what is a food scientist, so that they do a lot of different things. But what I've specialized in is new product development. So I help to think of either food ingredients or final food products that can be invented at bench scale and then taken to a manufacturing plant and produced in large quantities. And I think that the highlight of my career so far has been working with Impossible Foods, which is a company that started about 12 years ago as a little tiny startup, and I joined when they were little. And I stayed with them for 10 years, and I ultimately was the VP of product development for that company. So we commercialized and launched 65 different products that are, chicken and meat and sausages and beef patties, but they're not made from animals. They're actually made from all plant proteins. So yeah, that's my professional experience in the food industry.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I already asked the question. on the
You already
EDC
asked your
meeting.
question. Okay.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
no, I just wanted to say that, part of the reason we deferred it to the full board is we really wanted both of you to be on the CAC. We thought both were excellent candidates. And the one thing about Beth is that we thought her background was different from with the food science and could be a good addition to the CAC, that it's different from a lot of the other CAC or all of the other CAC members. And thank you for coming back.
So for the record, Beth, do you want to give us your 1-minute elevator pitch?
Sure. So you've heard about my professional activities, and then from a personal standpoint, I've lived in the San Jose area for 25 years now, and I'm really an outdoor enthusiast. So I've always been hiking, and I've attended so many of your docent-led hikes and things like that over the years. And I realized at some point while doing all those outdoor activities that these parks and agencies need volunteers to help to keep the trails nice and the parks working. So I've then also gotten into volunteering and trail maintenance. The past couple of years, I focused a lot on work with the Bay Area Ridge Trail. I'm on their South Bay Trail Advisory Group. What I was finding with them though is they're so spread out, right? We're just kind of in the bottom portion of the Bay Area Ridge Trail down here. A lot of times they have meetings up in Berkeley. It's hard for me to get to. And yeah, when my husband saw this role advertised in the Mercury News, he's like, look at this, it's perfect for you because you get to still do that kind of outdoor type stuff that you like and help the public learn how to enjoy the parks. But you can stay closer to home and do it in your own neighborhood. So that's why I applied for the role.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you. I just want to say as a person who is recently on the CAC, both of these applications are outstanding. And having to choose one, but knowing that there's another position that will be opening up in a couple of months, it is a huge relief because I can see both of these women being a huge asset to the CAC.
Okay. Your motion?
One.
We have to choose one, but I think staff has clearly outlined that if we choose one tonight, that there's an opportunity, the application would stay on file, that they would be posted April ahead of time, so that in June, we would be making a selection for the second for the second opening.
Correct, and the term starts July 1st for the next 2-year term.
For the next year.
So I'm going to move the motion for that.
I second.
So we have a motion to approve Beth Fritzdale to the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Director Kenneth,
Yes.
Director Chapman.
No.
Director Sutherland,
Yes.
Director Alexander.
Yes.
Director Potter,
Yes.
Director Gale.
Yes.
That motion passes. Congratulations, Beth. Next, item, we are receiving a report from the Financial Sustainability Ad Hoc Committee and approval for facilitating a voter survey to explore feasibility of a June 2026 funding measure. A little light topic for everyone.
Good evening, board members. Before you is a progress report from staff and the Financial Sustainability Ad Hoc Committee on the need for additional revenue and the feasibility of pursuing an open space funding measure in June 2026. Staff will be recommending that the board direct that a voter survey be conducted and that staff return to the board to discuss the polling results and consideration of the draft expenditure plan. A little bit of background: from October 2023 through January 2025, this Financial Sustainability Ad Hoc Committee of the Authority Board of Directors met with staff to discuss the authority's growing revenue needs and have discussed a potential funding measure and the finance mechanism options that we would ultimately recommend to the board. So you can see here, our agenda tonight in this agenda item is that staff, consultants, and council are going to walk you through these topics. First, the growing need for ongoing revenue to protect and maintain our growing system of natural and working lands for the public's benefit. Secondly, a financial forecast and revenue need. Thirdly, assessment and takeaways from the 2024 state and local measures from around the Bay region and the state. Then a range of funding mechanism options that are being looked at. The preference for a building square footage parcel tax. Amendments to the Authorities Enabling Act related to future funding options. We're going to hear from consultants about recent focus groups and discuss with you prospective polling coming up. We'll give the highlights of a draft expenditure plan, and then we'll get to the recommendation to the board. So the next slide, please. So we have growing needs for revenue and for protecting and maintaining natural and working lands, and they are basically these factors: to steward nature, especially land and natural resources management, climate resilience, the buffering of communities from wildfire, flood, drought, and heat, and addressing the significant increase that we're seeing at our preserves in visitation. Next slide. So this slide shows the graph of growing protected acreage at the Open Space Authority, and from the very far left at the start of our land acquisition history all the way up pretty much to the present. And right in the middle there is our 2014 Measure Q. So the authority has demonstrated increased need for dedicated revenue to support ongoing operations, management, and stewardship of our open space lands and natural resource stewardship on this growing system of open space lands. So you can see here, in 2014, we were about at 16,000 acres when Measure Q was passed by voters in 2014. Today, that acreage has almost doubled to 30,000 acres in one of the most expensive real estate markets in the nation. There's growing demand for the authority's work to protect and manage natural and working lands and to steward them responsibly, also given the urgency of climate change. Well-managed natural and working lands help protect communities from more frequent and intense wildfires, flooding, drought, and temperature extremes. And we see growing demand and public expectation for timely opening of new public open space preserves and visitation to our preserves. We are at over 300,000 visitors or visits in 2024. This requires significant investment in public access improvements for staging areas and other public facilities, as well as staffing to maintain safe, clean open space preserves and trails once they're open to the public. So as our responsibilities grow to manage natural and working lands, so too are our financial responsibilities growing proportionally. The lands require ongoing stewardship to remain healthy and resilient in the face of climate change, and we're responsible for protecting and restoring critical habitat for plant and animal species and to safeguard the creeks, streams, and wetlands on our properties. Next slide, please. So this slide you recognize is of the Coyote Valley landscape, and this is a very good example of the authority's growing land and stewardship responsibilities. This is a slide, an aerial photo reflective of the state of affairs in 2014, where we were pretty much responsible for the 348-acre Coyote Valley Open Space Preserve, which then opened to the public in 2015. You can see that in the far left corner of the picture. The next slide. So let's flash forward 10 years and $120 million of conservation investment later. The authority will soon be responsible for managing closer to 2,000 acres, with responsibility to permanently safeguard, plan for, and restore the acreage that you see in green in this slide. So there is much work to be done and much funding needed to do that work in order to protect, restore, open, and perpetually manage this significant public asset. To achieve this, the authority staff are developing a multi-year work plan and budget for implementing many projects essential to its mission, including habitat restoration, invasive species management, fuel reduction strategies to prevent catastrophic wildfire, improvements to public access, all which necessitate ongoing increased staffing for maintenance, management, and stewardship. Next slide, please. So these are challenging fiscal times for public agencies, and the Open Space Authority is no exception. The costs of operation and maintenance is consuming a larger percentage of the authority's primary funding sources, which we call District 1 and Measure Q, which was succeeded by Measure T, a no-cost extension of Measure Q in 2020. When you combine those two sources, that's the green line, flat line going across the screen there, that generates approximately $12 million annually, but as you can see in the graph, remains flat with no built-in mechanism to keep pace with rising costs and to manage additional open space lands as they come to the Open Space Authority. So in other words, the authority is operating on the same revenue stream today as it was in 2014. So this slide shows that the agency's operating revenues, which are the bars increasingly going up to the right, are not sufficient to sustain the demand on the agency over time and would require the use of the agency's operational reserve as bridge funding until new revenues can be secured. So the yellow line is the operational reserve. Since its creation in 1993, the authority has been a very efficient and transparent agency about its expenditures of public money. The authority has been a pay-as-you-go agency, and unlike many government agencies, has no accumulated debt. We've been able to efficiently leverage our modest and dedicated revenue streams to attract significant public and private funding from state, federal, and private sources to implement our land conservation, restoration, and public access projects, and we receive excellent annual audits and transparency reviews. To date, the authority has brought in more than $180 million of outside grant funding to leverage our local tax revenues, which equates to an approximately 3-to-1 and sometimes 4-to-1 match on key projects. However, these leverage funds can only be spent on capital projects, such as buying land and building facilities, and cannot be spent on managing and stewarding land and natural resources to protect ecosystems, water resources, and ensure public safety. Those costs must be borne by the agency's existing tax revenues. We've taken a prudent approach to budgeting and spending over the years. You may recall in your approved budget for this year, the current fiscal year, our spending is 18% lower than in 23-24, and 24% lower than in 22-23. We've achieved this by deferring large capital projects and prioritizing those projects that have significant outside funding from federal and state grant programs and foundations. The current budget also included an additional 4% reduction in operational spending by leaving certain staff positions unfilled. And our current fiscal approach is that all work must be completed with current staffing levels. Still, the authority will need additional revenue in the coming years beyond its current base revenues to maintain its current level of managing, stewarding, and caring for public lands and waters, wildfire risk, and providing safe, clean visitor amenities. And this track record has received many accolades from the public, who often compare how well we manage our lands and our trails with other agencies. So for these reasons, the Financial Sustainability Ad Hoc Committee has been exploring placement of a possible funding measure on the June 2026 primary ballot. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, directors, staff, members of the public. I am the Assistant General Manager and Mark Landgraf. And if you can move to the next slide, please. So as we consider the agency's future revenue.
Can I ask one question before we do the next, if you don't mind? Andrea, this slide, so seems to look like 22, year 22, 23. So our estimate revenue plus the reserve will be going zero, right? That's you showing that? Yeah.
Yeah, you could start to see where the lines cross,
Okay,
and then if we have no additional.
This one, actually this one plus this one. So every year what we have that one, when we reach 32 to 33, then there is no any money will be left. That's what you're showing?
That's our projections.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's right.
All right, so as we consider our agency's future revenue needs, we'd like to take a brief step backwards to provide a bit of context. As your board is aware, the ad hoc committee was considering the feasibility of a funding measure for the November 2024 ballot. At that time, polling showed insufficient voter support for reaching the 2/3 threshold required. Staff had been closely tracking Assembly Constitutional Amendment ACA 1, which if itself passed by voters would have lowered the vote threshold for public infrastructure focused bond and special tax measures to 55%. This could have potentially provided a path to success for an authority funding measure. However, in early summer of 2024, the special tax provisions were removed from ACA 1. The authority board subsequently decided to withdraw its efforts for November 2024 and instead pivot to exploring a June 2026 measure. Next slide, please. So this graph shows levels of support for past potential funding measures going back to 2013. If you direct your attention first to the blue bars, those show actual support at the ballot box from voters for the authority's past two funding measures, Measure Q in 2014 and Measure T in 2020. The bars immediately to the left of each of the blue bars shows a level of support in the surveys that had been taken prior to those votes. Next slide, please. So in addition, I wanted to provide some other context as takeaways from November 2024. So I believe you're all familiar with State Proposition 4, also known as the Climate Bond, which passed with roughly 60% statewide, but with over 64% in Santa Clara County, demonstrating strong local support for climate-related actions. Of the $10 billion in Proposition 4, $25 million was identified specifically for the Coyote Valley Conservation Program established in state statute by AB 948 from Assemblymember Calder in 2019. This funding will be administered by the State Coastal Conservancy and the conservation program itself will be administered by the Open Space Authority. Also of note, from the November elections, our local open space related measures passed in Santa Cruz County. Measure Q raising 7.5 million annually for climate related conservation and other climate risk resilience and reduction efforts. And in San Benito County, Measure A requiring a vote of the people for proposed land use changes from agriculture and open space. I also wanted to point out that Bay Area wide polling conducted by joint venture Silicon Valley shows some improvement in overall public sentiment, with those feeling that we're on the wrong track in the Bay Area, down from 72% to 62%. We're also seeing greater understanding by the public of the importance of protecting communities from wildfire, flood, drought, and extreme heat, though more education is needed to increase understanding of the important role that natural and working lands play in that protection. So at this point, I would like to introduce Barry Barnes with Team Civics, consultant to the Open Space Authority. I believe he's available by audio.
I'm here. Can you see or hear me, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. I just wanted to add on a couple of points to what Mark just mentioned, which is we have seen in recent months, as you see on the slide, back to November of 2024, but even more recently, polling in the Bay Area for other potential measures that is showing the right track, wrong track numbers continuing to go the right way in terms of voters feeling better, residents feeling better about their local communities, about the state of affairs. Sometimes this is hard to believe given kind of political turmoil at all levels of government right now. But it's not hard to believe when you think back to 2020, in the midst of COVID, the right track numbers were some of the highest ever. And part of this, I think, is that residents, particularly in the Bay Area and in Santa Clara County, feel very confident about their local leadership, about the local ability, the ability of local communities to take care of basic services, not depending on state or federal government for basic services. And so we're continuing to see some nice growth this year, similar to what we saw in 2020, again, when I had the privilege of working with many of you on Measure T, which was an important measure to pass at that particular election. Mark also mentioned the Santa Cruz measure, which passed in November 2024. My partner Jared Boygan and colleague Joey worked on that measure as well, and I'm sure we'll talk more about some of the specifics or unique pieces of that measure as well. It's still very premature for it, to cast conclusions about what could pass in 2026. But then again, this is the time to do the research. Jessica will be talking about the focus groups that were just conducted, as well as hopefully polling to dip our toe back in the water and see how voters are feeling about addressing the needs of the district that Andrea just walked through.
All right, thank you, Barry. Just a brief transition before I introduce our next speaker. I just wanted to mention that the Financial Sustainability Ad Hoc Committee of the board, which includes directors Potter, Chapman, and Director Annable until December 24, 2024, when Director Sutherland replaced Director Annable, and staff have been meeting since fall of 2023 to evaluate various funding mechanisms for a future potential ballot measure. So to help us understand some of those potential funding mechanisms, I wanted to introduce Robert Perlmutter with the law firm Shoup, Mahaley, Weinberger. And if we can go to the next slide, please.
Thanks, Mark, and through the chair. And as some of you may recall, I helped work with the board and guide you through the adoption of Measure Q in 2014 and Measure T as well in 2020. And have now been working closely with the ad hoc committee for the last year and a half. I just want to give you a very kind of big picture overview of the funding mechanisms before you relate them a little bit to what we saw in the last ballot measure, and answer any questions you might have. There's three primary mechanisms for tax options before you. One is all of which are special, known as special taxes because you're a special district for special purpose. One is a flat parcel tax, which is what Measure Q and Measure T were. It's just what it sounds like. It's a flat rate that applies to all parcels. In this case, it was Measure $24 and Measure Q readopted without increase by Measure T. And it's a really flexible mechanism in the sense that the tax revenues can be used for any purpose specified in the ballot measure approved by the voters. So including operations and maintenance, stewardship activities, and other things. It just have to be things that are consistent with what's approved with the voters. It is a flat rate, so it doesn't really, well, the rate doesn't increase over time. And in a built out area like yours, you don't have a lot of new parcels created. So it goes up very little over time. So that's one option. Another option, which you haven't used in the past, but a number of jurisdictions increasingly are doing, is what's known as a building square footage parcel tax. So still based on a parcel per parcel, but the amount is a rate, usually a very small rate, but for each square foot of improvements or building. And that even in a highly developed area, that goes up over time because you have more and bigger buildings built over time. So it's and your financial consultants can help project how that will go up over time. So similar to a flat parcel tax, can be used for any operations and maintenance or anything else specified in the expenditure plan, the ballot measure that's approved by the voters. And then the third general category, which certainly I haven't worked on with you in the past, and I don't believe the district's adopted, is a general obligation bond, which you hear a lot about as a way of raising a lot of money. Prop 4 just did that, was approved by the voters in float bonds, and then you have to pay those off through taxes. The major limitation on those and why it's really not helpful for your immediate financial needs is they're limited to, with very few exceptions, to capital facilities outlay. So it can't be used for the type of operations and maintenance, ongoing stewardship that are your critical needs. And the one other thing I wanted to add is that traditionally the approach to special districts like yours and for special taxes in general has been through what's known as a board sponsored measure. The board, working with their staff, develops the language that goes in a ballot measure. You draft it, you place it on the ballot measure. And if it's approved by 2/3 of the voters, so 66.6% or more, which is hard to achieve, done it twice, but it's hard to achieve, the tax goes into effect, and then there's no sunset, it remains in effect unless changed by the voters. Due to a significant change in the law in just the last couple of years, we've seen the emergence of what are known as voter-sponsored measures. And those are tax measures that you don't draft, you don't control, but the voters in your jurisdiction through the initiative power could potentially draft a measure and place it on the ballot. The reason why we're seeing a little bit more of that is because the courts have held, just starting in 2020, that those measures are not subject to a 2/3 vote, but to a 50% plus one vote. So a very different mechanism, easier to achieve. I mention it now just to let, because Santa Cruz, that's what happened in Santa Cruz. We're seeing that more around the state. It's not something you can control or you're being asked to do anything about right now, but it's possible in the future that the voters in your jurisdiction might propose something like that. If that does happen, yeah, we would guide you through your role and process in that process, which is very different than your role in the process for placing a board suspension once a measure of ballot. That was my presentation.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thank you, Pearl, very much. If we could go to the next slide, please. So now I want to walk the board through some financial modeling we did with NHA Advisors and NBS Financial, our financial consultants, to determine anticipated needs, especially for operating expenses over the next 15 plus years. And then look at different funding mechanisms that could both provide the needed revenue and flexibility that Pearl was talking about, allowing us to do land and resource stewardship, sustaining public access, restoring natural lands and waters, and providing greater resilience to climate change. So we did significant analysis with our municipal finance experts and really concluding that the building square footage parcel tax in a range from 1.5 cents to 2.5 cents per square foot of building area would generate significant revenue and sufficient revenue to meet our needs over the forecast period. could increase over time as density increases, and would also advance equity, would be a
More progressive.
progressive, thank you, progressive approach, given that the average homeowner would pay significantly less than a company with a large development footprint. So here on the screen, you can see the approximate revenue generated at 1.5 cents, 2 cents, and 2.5 cents per square foot of building area. And this was calculated for the 333,819 parcels in the authority's jurisdiction. The equivalent parcel tax, well, let me go back first to if we do the building per square footage parcel tax at 1.5 cents per square foot, it generates approximately 13 million a year, which is double the revenue we currently have from District 1 and Measure T. If we went to 2 cents per building square foot, you could see it generates about $17.4 million a year. And at 2.5 cents per square foot of building area, generates about $22.2 million a year. If the feedback that we get is that a flat parcel tax is preferable to a building square footage parcel tax, the average payment would be in order that you see there, $39 a parcel for the 1.5 cents, $52 a parcel for the 2 cent, and $65 per parcel for the 2.5 cent. There are a lot of benefits to going with the building square footage and not the parcel tax. And I think, Mark, you want to explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, by way of comparison, if you look at that $39 per parcel for the flat tax, if you were to compare that to what, say, an average household would pay under the building per square foot tax, the more progressive version, a 1,600 square foot home would pay $24 a year. So you can compare the 24 to the 39, and of course that $24 is quite a bit better. And that's because the much larger developed areas, which tends to be large corporations, they would be paying a greater share.
Okay, thanks. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've done some revenue forecast tax scenarios. And here we're looking at the building square footage parcel tax at the 1.5, 2, and 2.5 cents per square foot of building area as compared to the bottom line there, which is our existing revenues. So you can see it's pretty significant difference between our significant revenues and even at the 1.5 cent, which is the blue line, the bright green line, which is 2 cents, and then the dark green line, which is 2.5 cents. The gradual slope in the line that you see over time, our consultants calculated a very conservative assumption that as growth happens in the cities, which is where density should go instead of out on open space and agricultural land, they conservatively estimated there is about 7.5 million square feet of growth in the urban areas projected each year. So that gives you an increase, whichever level you pick, you see an increase over time, which you did not see as Pearl was talking about with the flat parcel tax, because we're just not creating lots and lots of new parcels. However, we are creating a lot of new density in the cities. Next slide, please. So this graph shows the anticipated revenue at a scenario of 2 cents per square foot of building area. So again, the graph over time, the bar charts shows the need over time, which we saw earlier with our reserves bailing us out those first few years, but the line's starting to cross. Here we see a big delta between the existing revenues we have and what would come in under a 2 cent per building square foot. And why that is so important is it allows us to bond against the new revenue in the early years to complete high priority capital projects, which instead of having to save up on a pay-as-you-go basis, we could use that funding to front load capital projects, open new lands to the public, and acquire more land. We have obviously would continue our very successful practice of going after grants, which we have an amazing team that has brought in a lot of money from grants, as we've talked about. But this is very demonstrative of why something in the realm of 1.5 to 2.5 cents per building square foot here really just gives us room to grow, not to grow because for the sake of growing, but really to deliver for the public those projects, that restoration, those public access projects that we've promised the public that we would do. Okay, Mark.
Next slide, please. The recent amendments made to the Authorities Enabling Act via AB 2682 allow the authority to offer low-income senior exemptions from any new tax that we levy. The intention of the ad hoc committee is to recommend incorporating an exemption for low-income seniors in the funding measure under consideration, and therefore into any related voter survey as well. Other changes in AB 2682 that are relevant to future revenue and expenditures include the ability to purchase land and conservation easements from willing sellers in the mountains east of Coyote Ridge, in other words, the Diablo Mountain Range, and as well the ability to create community facilities districts, which are also known as Belarus districts. With that, I would like to introduce Jessica Polsky, who is I think with us on audio as well. She is with EMC Research, also a consultant to the Open Space Authority.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. Hi, everyone. Jessica Polsky Sanchez with EMC Research. On the next slide, I think we have an introduction to a very quick summary highlight report of what we heard from voters in these recent focus groups with likely voters here in Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. We did hear from this group, which, in focus groups, which are qualitative research, we don't have statistically generalizable feedback, but we do have the opportunity to hear directly from voters how they react to the idea of a measure for the Open Space Authority, what their priorities are, how they think about and talk about these issues, and more of the kind of what's the why behind the opinions that they hold. And we did intentionally recruit participants who have what we would call kind of middle of the road views when it comes to taxes in general and also measures for environmental issues. So on the next slide, we'll just walk through some high-level key findings. We talked through with these voters the things that they kind of like about living in this area, the things they don't like so much, what are their top concerns, and what do they think needs more funding. What really comes up most frequently are housing issues and cost of living issues. These seem to be major concerns with this group of voters. We also heard them mention things like the need for more social services. They mentioned traffic and roads and infrastructure issues as needing more funding. We don't hear, however, anything around kind of open space preservation, environmental issues like wildfires or climate change. These aren't as top of mind for this group of voters. On the next slide, we wanted to share with you what we shared with these voters in the focus groups. And this was what we called a potential ballot measure for the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. This might look a little long, and indeed it is longer than an actual 75-word ballot question, but we wanted to present it to the participants so that we could get their reactions on some of the potential projects that could be mentioned in a ballot question, and hear their feedback on what they like, what they didn't like as much, and what was a little bit confusing. So all of these projects and this potential measure wording was presented to them. And on the next slide, we asked them what they really liked best about that ballot question. And what came up really frequently were projects like protecting drinking water quality, reducing wildfire risk, preserving open spaces for future generations, this idea that we want our children to be able to enjoy nature the way that we have, and then safeguarding wildlife habitats, to a little bit of a lesser extent, but still these themes came up most frequently as the pieces of a measure favored by this group of focus group participants. On the next slide, what was also interesting is when we asked, what do you not like as much about this potential measure, or what doesn't seem possible? We definitely heard that the projects that mentioned protecting communities from extreme weather impacts and reducing risk from severe droughts and floods, even though these things sounded good, they didn't sound achievable through this measure. And so they certainly gave us the feedback that that this didn't sound possible. It sounded a little too lofty. It didn't sound tangible in a way that they expected from this kind of ballot measure. On the next slide. When we asked, okay, what is confusing, or what do you have questions about when it comes to this measure? We certainly heard some confusion around details like how long would this last? What is a square footage tax measure? How much would that cost them? They weren't really sure. Who would be taxed? Would it be only homeowners? Would it be businesses too? Would renters have to pay? So they had questions around these things. And we think, based on that confusion that we heard, ensuring that answers to these kinds of questions are readily available will help avoid some of the skepticism we heard around these factors. So on the next slide, really last but not least, when it comes to the actual cost, the 1.5 cents per square foot of building area that we presented in this potential ballot measure in the focus groups. Interestingly, participants didn't find that to be expensive. They said it sounded kind of reasonable, especially when we explained the average of $24 per parcel. That is not to say, however, that we didn't hear tax sensitivity. We definitely heard voters feeling very sensitive about approving new taxes, especially right now, because they are very aware of taxes that they have supported historically and the taxes that they're paying now. So they certainly are seeking transparency and accountability in any potential new tax measure. And that is summarized on the next slide as well. That participants told us that any measure that they would support has to seem reasonable, it has to seem doable, has to have a clearly outlined purpose. And we really think that that voters are asking for, some kind of way to make it easy to understand how the funds will be allocated. And that includes how funds are currently allocated. So really emphasizing transparency, and something that is reasonable and doable. That certainly would go a long way, especially with this particular group of voters that we talked to. So with that, we hope to take these findings and translate them into a poll, because again, focus groups allow us to really hear directly from voters. What are things they care about? What are the things that confuse them? What are the reasons behind their opinions? We learned a lot that we think will be helpful in shaping a survey of likely voters that would dig into the feasibility of a potential measure for 2026. So that's, I think that's the end of this presentation, but happy to answer any questions.
So there will be more presentation from us. I think Jessica is just done with her portion. So if I may, I can continue unless there are questions at this point.
The questions,
Any questions?
yes, the skepticism about the concern about the results of climate change. Were these questions asked before or since the wildfire disaster in Los Angeles?
Yeah, these focus groups were conducted after the wildfires, so they were more recent, and there were participants who mentioned the wildfires in LA, and preventing against wildfires was certainly one of the top priorities. What we heard, however, was that they didn't make a connection between that and climate change or the ability of a measure like this to impact weather or extreme weather at the local level. That's what we heard when it comes to skepticism.
Clarify, Jessica, another way of saying that is, and we've seen this when we go out and talk to the public, making this connection of how the protection and restoration of nature is a factor in climate change, addressing climate change, or how protecting, managing nature can reduce wildfires or floods or address drought. There are folks who just don't make the connection about how the natural world and climate change interact. And so I think that's part of our job to do that education.
All right, Madam Chair, I'll continue with the presentation. Can we have the next slide? This is just the closing slide for EMC Research. Really appreciate the work that they did, and thank you, Jessica, for entertaining questions. As we see on this slide, I just wanted to mention, there has been quite a bit of outreach to representatives of the business community by authority staff, and we've begun to build awareness and collect feedback regarding a possible funding measure and the value this modest investment brings to their companies and their employees. Authority staff will also be conducting general public education and outreach about the work the authority performs on behalf of the public, the importance of ongoing land stewardship, and the agency's anticipated financial needs. In order to help staff with education and outreach and with making connections to the business community and members of the public about the agency's work, the authority staff have formed a kitchen cabinet of volunteer advisors who will meet monthly over the next few months. Their first meeting of the advisory group was held on January 24th of this year, and the next meeting for this group will be held tomorrow.
Next slide, please. So as the board well knows, when you place a funding measure before voters, there is an expenditure plan that describes how the revenues would be expended to meet the mission. And so like Measure Q and Measure T, staff and council have developed a draft expenditure plan for a potential funding measure. It's attached to the staff report that's before you tonight. It's also available on our website for public input and feedback. And the draft expenditure plan really looks at 6 program areas that are listed for you here: protecting natural and working lands, restoring, maintaining, and stewarding open space and natural resources, expanding public access, expanding investment in urban parks, the urban setting, engaging and educating the community about nature, and supporting agriculture and healthy soils. The draft expenditure plan reinforces Measure T, continuing existing successful conservation programs, and it emphasizes 11 specific projects and programs in the geographic areas across the authority's jurisdiction. It continues the urban grants program, and it prioritizes clean, safe water, managing vegetation for wildfire risk, restoring and stewarding habitat, and ensuring equal access to open space, and maintaining the high-quality experiences for visitors that they've come to depend on from the Open Space Authority. In terms of the urban investments, the draft plan builds on the investments we've already made, over $15 million in urban communities, in a couple of ways. It will fund projects that provide greater equitable access to nature in Milpitas, Santa Clara, San Jose, Campbell, Morgan Hill, and the unincorporated urban area. It will advance projects that create healthy and safe open space and park areas in local communities. And it will invest in climate resilient communities through partnerships, such as with Santa Clara County and its Climate Collaborative. The expenditure plan emphasizes stewardship, restoration, and ongoing land management for the authority's growing open space preservation system, enhancement of biodiversity, support for nature-based solutions to climate change, which you've heard a lot about tonight. In terms of public input and feedback on the draft expenditure plan, we're soliciting this through a variety of means. The agency's website, the authority board and citizens advisory committee meetings, and with the CAC, including via an outreach committee being led by the CAC. The kitchen cabinet of advisors that Mark mentioned are helping guide us to individuals, community groups, communities themselves, and different sectors where we can do outreach and education and awareness building. And social media outreach, public education, and public surveys, soliciting input into the Open Space Authority's future priorities. And then as these inputs are collected and inform the draft plan, staff will be returning to the board in subsequent meetings with updates and opportunities to brief you on that feedback we're receiving and also to get feedback from this board. Next slide. So to sum up our presentation, and thank you for your attention tonight, staff recommends the authority board approve conducting a survey of likely June 2026 voters in the time frame of March, April 2025 to determine potential support levels for a future funding measure. Staff is also recommending that the authority board direct staff to return to your board for continued input on the draft expenditure plan, to report on results from the voter survey and what its implications are for a potential funding measure in June 2026. And with that, I'll turn the presentation back to our board chair, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'm interested in my colleagues that are not on the ad hoc committee because some of us have been hearing some of this pearls nodding. We've been hearing this for a couple of years now and are fully immersed in this, but I think there's probably some board members that for you, this is brand new, or at least, you know, you're diving in deeper. And so I'm looking to see if you have any questions that you want to ask Director Alexander, perhaps.
Sure. Building on what Director Kennett asked earlier, I live very close to an open space area, not owned or managed by the authority, but it's certainly a concern for me. So as we experience greater risk of fires and floods, droughts, we know that managing our open space lands, especially near residential communities, will be important to the public. So I would love some more information about what the authority is doing to respond to this increasing risk of fires, floods, and droughts. And it sounds like something based on the focus groups that would be important to the public at large.
Thank you, Director Alexander, for your question. Shall I respond to that one? Well, thank you for that. And the authority is taking many steps to respond to these growing risks. The kind of thing we were seeing just recently in the Pacific Palisades and Altadena in Southern California, that unfortunately is the new normal. And as we take on responsibility for more and more open space lands, these risks are something that we're going to have to incorporate into our planning and our long-range management and partnerships with other agencies. So I'll just kind of touch on a few things that we're doing. Well, for one, protecting more conservation lands adjoining our urban areas, these so-called wildland urban interface lands. While they can become a source of a fire, they are also the buffers that buffer our communities from catastrophic wildfire. So that's really the first step. We also manage our lands to reduce fuel loads, that burnable material, the vegetation that's on these lands. And we do that through a variety of ways. We can do it through mechanical and manual removal of vegetation, which our open space technicians, our field ops folks do. We also manage lands through what we call conservation grazing. We're working with ranchers who have been ranching these lands across Santa Clara County for generations with their cattle, principally. Sometimes you see sheep also being used. And so they are grazing down the fuel loads, mostly grasslands, to reduce fire, and that's an important service that they provide. How do we reduce flood risk? Well, when you saw the flooding in downtown San Jose in 2017, 14,000 people evacuated, $100 million in damage. This was along Coyote Creek. Upstream of Coyote Creek is the Coyote Valley, the last undeveloped floodplains that have not been paved over in upstream of San Jose. So protecting the natural floodplains of our upper watersheds above our cities is an imperative. We also are working on, and you'll be hearing more about this at your March meeting, our staff, including our field operations staff and our natural resource staff, are going to be tackling this question for you head on. In the last couple of days, you've probably seen articles in the Mercury News about new fire hazard maps that have come out, really high resolution maps that are taking it down to the city level and showing the relationship of fire prone areas to cities. So we'll be talking to you about that. But we have really high resolution GIS data and maps that we provide to first responders when they come to fight fires, to direct them where the fire breaks are, where the most important places are they can land helicopters, and most importantly, or as importantly, what areas, as they're bringing in heavy machinery, to try and avoid to protect these really sensitive lands. So yes, it's going to be about managing fire, about putting out catastrophic wildfire, but also protecting the ecosystems that the public has so heavily invested in. And lastly, I just learned this from our staff in the last week or two. We're working very closely with residential communities in the wildland urban interface to make sure that they know where safe evacuation routes are going across open space lands in the event that we have these big wildfires. We've done it before, and we're continuing to build on that work. So thank you, Director Alexander.
Thank you.
Director Gill, any questions?
Actually, I'm just going to ask just two questions. Oh, I think one at a time. If the authority pursues a building square footage tax, what would be the average homeowners pay, and what would companies / business pay? You understand, or I can repeat the question?
No, thank you. Thank you for the questions through the chair. So you asked what homeowners would pay and what businesses would pay under the building square footage tax scenario. So if we use like the 2 cents per square foot tax that was in the middle of the 3 scenarios that we're looking at, the average 1,600 square foot home would pay $32 per year, 2 cents per square foot. The largest businesses, and our consultants did pull data from information provided by the tax assessor's office, that the largest companies or the companies with the largest square footage of development in our jurisdiction would pay several tens of thousands of dollars. But that's pretty much for the largest handful of businesses, and then it quickly drops down to $10,000 or $15,000 per year.
Thank you. Another question is actually very similar to that question. That is, what is the advantage of the building square footage tax over what we are now? A flat parcel tax we are just charging right now. What is the advantage?
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, so the advantage of building square footage type of tax is, as General Manager was mentioning earlier, it's a progressive tax. So it reduces what the average resident would have to pay and puts more of the burden on corporations that, you know, we can think about having more impact on the environment. And so it's more of a equitable distribution. So as one of the previous slides showed, if the 2 cents per square foot building square footage tax is levied on an average home that's $32, like I just answered in the previous question, you can compare that to $52 per parcel that would come from a flat parcel tax. So roughly $20 less for the average homeowner.
It means better for the low poverty people, right?
Yeah, well, and yeah, through the chair. So in addition to it being a more progressive or equitable mechanism, then because of our Enabling Act amendments, we also would hope to include a senior low income exemption as well. So people could apply for that and then be exempted completely.
Thank you. Makes sense.
Through the chair. I also, just to piggyback on that, one of the things that I remember from the committee was if you had a 10,000 square foot house, you would pay more. If you had a 1,000 square foot house, you'd pay less. That's the progressive aspect of it. It presumably, but to be at the same rate.
I'm surmising that the people that are not making the connection between the climate change and the issues may not have heard about the Open Space Authority. Would really be helpful if part of the education process in getting this thing passed would be to emphasize what the Open Space Authority is and what they do, because as you know, and we sat at a table with movers and shakers in Morgan Hill, and they didn't know who we were, and that always bugs me, you know. So would hope that would be addressed here.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Director Kennett. We are constantly trying to build awareness in our jurisdiction. There are still a lot of people, as you say, that don't know the Open Space Authority. However, you know, our communications department has been putting out more material through the ethnic media in languages, and we've seen a lot of receptivity to that. So we know we're building audiences there. We'll continue to increase that awareness building. We're also through our VETS team, the volunteer and education teams, doing a lot of outreach at events throughout our jurisdiction. So that will continue to build awareness. And then we are also planning to do quite a bit of personal outreach through neighborhood organizations that our kitchen cabinet advisors lead us to. And I would actually then ask all of you on our board to also help us make further connections where we can do presentations or provide more information so we get the word out. Lots of different things going on. In fact, in the next month, in March, your board will hear a presentation from our communications department on what they're currently up to and plan for the coming year.
Also, considering what's going on in DC and everything and the concern about any tax or any. Gonna be an interesting time ahead of us and people are. They're losing jobs. Any expense could, you know. We don't want to put people in the position of having to choose between rent and groceries, so. How is that being addressed?
Thank you, Director Kennett, for that question. I think it's fair to say no one likes taxes per se, but the reality is that taxes are the primary source of revenue for this agency when it was formed 30 years ago and continues to be the case. We have sister agencies formed during the Depression, East Bay Regional Park District, Mid-Peninsula Open Space, Regional Open Space formed in 1972, both funded with property taxes, which pretty much go up, not down. We were one of the new kids on the block when we were formed in 1993. And so we are funded principally through parcel taxes. And as you heard tonight, those parcel taxes are flat. Sometimes we have to go back to the voters to ask for those funds again, which makes the momentum of doing the public's work that more challenging. That being said, I think we are a small, scrappy agency of 50 some odd employees, passionate employees, and we've gotten so much done very efficiently and effectively. Earlier on, I talked about for every dollar of local taxes that we raise, we generate about $3 or sometimes $4 from local outside funding sources like state, sometimes federal grants, and foundation private monies. You heard me say that we've not changed the amount that the public provides to us through our local taxes in 10 years. So that's a big deal, as we've more than doubled our acreage and we'll increase it another 25% more in the next few years. Maintaining that same level of revenue is going to be extremely challenging to the public. So as we go back out, we feel like what we have analyzed with our financial experts, and we started to ask the public and the business leaders and even the focus groups how they feel about $24 or $32. And the response we usually get is that that's a very modest ask. However, show us how you efficiently have spent that money and show us how you're going to spend that money going forward in the future in a way that really benefits me. And I think we have a plan to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that leads me to my question. You sort of touched on it earlier, because we actually are spending less, we're scaling back, but how do we let the public know that we're being fiscally conservative, that we're being good stewards of their money? Because I think it's important right now that we demonstrate that.
Take that one. Well, I think I touched on it a little bit with Director Kennett's question, but a good indication of that is how we've operated in these tight fiscal times over the last 3 years, with reductions in 18%, 24%, 22%. I think we're an agency that shows that we're living within our means. However, you can't live within your means on a flat parcel tax indefinitely while you're growing by doubling the acreage, opening more and more preserves, and trying to manage those lands for wildfire risk and flood and all those kinds of concerns that the public has. So what we're really asking for is a modest raise in the amount that the Open Space Authority brings in, very modest amount, that will allow us to protect thousands more acres while bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars in leveraged funds as we go forward. We've opened up the Sierra Vista, Coyote Valley, and Coyote Ridge open space preserves since our last raise in 2014 with Measure Q. We've added to our trail system. We're now at 33 miles of trails across our preserves. In the next few weeks, the public can come out and be treated to one of the most spectacular wildflower displays in the entire Northern California. And that's because with the public's help, we've protected the Coyote Ridge, Mayano Yakima Coyote Ridge. That was an $18 million purchase back in 2015. And the amount that the Open Space Authority put into that $18 million purchase, $7,500. The rest we leveraged with foundations and grants to both acquire and open that preserve to the public. And I would just encourage anyone listening tonight, if you want to have a sense of how we've spent your money, thanks to our very talented communications department, check out our 30-year impact report and our impact report just from 2024. They're both on our website and they're really fun to look at. There's a lot of beautiful pictures, but it really gives you an idea of how well we've managed and invested the public's money. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. One of the things I did want to bring up is that I know that the urban grant program was incredibly popular. And I remember when it was being formed, working with Megan and other members of the CAC and the board on that. And so what personally I really found helpful for that is that it brought the work of the organization into our urban cores so that people who may not have the opportunity or the ability to go outside into the undeveloped areas could see their money being spent in their backyard. And so I think that that's very important to maintain, that we still continue to do work and fund especially in the disadvantaged communities that are in our jurisdiction. And so I'm hoping that we can continue to do that, because I think that that's a great way to make people aware of it's not just the wildlands, it's here too. And so I'm hoping that Megan, you give some more details.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I'm of course biased, but very excited about our grant programs and the work we've done. So between our two grant programs, we've given out more than $15 million, and that's to nonprofits, schools, public agencies throughout the jurisdiction. And as you indicated, we've done lots of different kinds of projects. This is everything from trails, parks that are in urban areas, but also educational programs and community gardens and all kinds of things to bring nature to the urban areas. So the draft expenditure plan does include continuing this and expanding the funding for the urban grant program. And I'm personally very excited about continuing that work and bringing nature to the urban areas.
And we're doing it again soon, right?
Thank you. Stay tuned. Yes, we are working very hard right now on the next solicitation for the urban grant program. And we are expecting to bring the draft guidelines to the board in the next couple months for finalization, and then there will be a solicitation this year. It will be focused, assuming it's approved as is, it will be focused on programs. So that's educational programs and events, things like that. So yes, thank you. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
And if I can briefly add to that as well, the urban grant projects that our grantees have created with help from our funding they've been really, really popular through all of our communications channels, on social media, our newsletter, and also through earned media. So it goes back to a prior question from Director Kennett, that's another important way that we build awareness in the community about the work that we do is through those grantee projects. And I wanted to mention too, sorry, I'm blending things a little bit here, but to what the general manager also mentioned earlier about how we show that we're being fiscally responsible is we've gotten media hits on those too. we've, we put out press releases when we pass a budget, and we've gotten attention from that because while other governments are struggling, we are getting the work done. We're providing a lot of benefits to the public while we're also reducing our costs. That's not everybody that can say that.
Let me ask just the same question. So, did you guys monitoring that the grant we are giving to them, they are using wisely and benefit for the community?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We definitely have a lot of communication and oversight over past grants that have been given out. So part of the contract, they're required, of course, to give regular reports and we check in. But these are also, remember, reimbursement grants, so they don't get any funds. We see all the receipts. We can see what work is being done. And that's often a time for communication. If we're wondering why something is a little bit maybe different than we expect, we can talk to them about it. And then for capital projects, we generally have a site visit at the very beginning and then after the project is done. So we have kind of the before and after, so we can see literally what construction happened. For other projects, particularly when there's an event, an educational program of some kind, we try to attend at least one whenever we can and just, you really get the flavor of what's happening. And I can definitely report in all cases, a very happy group of folks who are participating in these and very excited for the programs.
Did you see any issue?
Any issue? Honestly, no issue in the sense, traditional sense, our grantees, again, because I think we stay in such close contact, Jackie Latham, our grants program coordinator, is just excellent at working with them. The issues we've seen have primarily been COVID related or things that were outside of the grantees' control, budget cuts, a staff member leaving, that kind of thing. Nothing that was a structural problem.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a follow-up question and then Georgia Bob.
Thank you. And then one of the things I wanted to just be assured, the funds that would come in from this measure, nobody can take them, right? These are, because we all see what's happening at the state, even Prop 4, right? The governor had to take some funds for the wildfires. We all understand that, but I think as this pot of funds that will come in will be open spaces. And I just like that reassurance.
Through the chair, yes, I can assure you of that. They're actually protected under the Constitution. The voters are approving the tax for a special purpose. It can only be used for those purposes specified in the expenditure line. So let me take it away.
Thank you.
Nowadays, that might be something we want to stress.
And I can also add to that because we have an expenditure oversight committee, they check to make sure that the expenses also match what was in the expenditure plan. So not only does that money stay with us, it is also spent for what the voters said it should be spent on.
Thank you. So Andrew, you touched on this, so just maybe a little more detail on what's the projected growth of our open space lands anticipated for us in the coming years?
That's a really good question, Director Potter. And we often say to Linda Kwong, who oversees our, real estate holdings, Linda, what's in your crystal ball? Where are we going to be 3 years, 5 years from now? And the answer is it depends. But you really have to be kind of a little bit more on the conservative side. So if you remember that graph I showed you, just since 2014, we've effectively doubled the acreage that we've conserved and are responsible for. Just based on the known land transfers that are coming to us from the Peninsula Open Space Trust and from the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency, who don't usually hold lands that they've helped acquire. They look to the Open Space Authority to take those on and open them up to the public. We're probably looking at another 5,000 to 7,000 acres in the next several years. And I don't know if Linda would agree with me that that's a conservative number, but I'm being conservative about it. But if we were to go with those numbers, that's a 25% increase. And why is this so important? The public doesn't always understand the difference between the Santa Clara County Parks Department and the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency and Peninsula Open Space Trust and the Open Space Authority. Aaron, I don't know if you want to speak to this, but we've been looking over the last year or so what we call our niche. Like, what is the unique value proposition that this agency provides that other agencies don't, or that you don't see in adjoining counties? I don't know, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. This is Aaron Aber, Natural Resources Manager. I think the board, we had a session maybe 8 or 9 months ago. Forgive me, my memory's fading here, but when we went over it, and really the idea was not just to say we do nature, we do conservation, but what are the things that really make us special and different? And some of the highlights I think were agriculture, unique ways of connecting people to nature, connecting to people where they are in the urban grants program. So I think in many ways that exercise helped us, get aligned in our messaging and our internal way of talking about us, so that when we're doing this kind of outreach to the public to say, you do know who we are, we can say it ourselves, right?
Thanks, Aaron. And I would also just add that each of those other agencies I mentioned, County Parks, Habitat Agency, Peninsula Open Space Trust, sometimes the Valley Transportation Authority, Valley Water, they have their own unique missions, and many times they're not in the business of holding on to lands. And increasingly, these entities are working through all kinds of processes, sometimes even mitigation processes, which allow them to then do really important projects for the public. And we've stepped up and said, we'll take on those lands. We'll manage those lands for you. So we are, in a lot of respects, the go-to land and natural resources management agency, in addition to having appropriate public access in Santa Clara County. So that's why, in a lot of ways, it's not just the lands that we buy, it's our partner agencies that we're pooling our funds, we're getting more land conserved, but we don't want the sticking point to be, oh, can never open these lands to the public. So we're stepping forward to do that work.
Just as one of the things for those newer employees and members of the public, our old office, this is a great office, so period, but our old office had a giant map of all of our lands. And as you could see, the green that had been protected, and then the kind of the gaps between it. So one of the things I always said is you got to connect the green to allow people to, when you're doing a trail connection, those kinds of things. So there's a reason we're still acquiring, is it's also, we've been making strategic acquisitions as they become available from willing sellers without overpaying, to connect those green dots to maximize the investment we make in those things from many years ago. So I'm hoping someday our green map comes back, our big map comes back. We can find some space in this building, but that's, to me, your answer triggered that. The connecting the green is something I think to look forward to.
No other questions from the board. We have a couple of public comments. Mr. Muirhead. Nice to see you. It's been a while.
Nice to be here. So you get my glass half empty worldview tonight. I appreciate what you're trying to do. I think your timing is problematic. The slide that was up there talked about doing a survey in March and April. In June, we're going to get the state budget, and we're going to get the county budget, and they're not going to be good for us. The thing, stealing a line from Secretary McNamara, we don't know what we don't know. But County Executive Williams gave a presentation to the board Tuesday, and it was very interesting and not very hopeful. And when he addressed the San Martin Neighborhood Alliance a couple of weeks earlier, trying to justify terminating South County Fire and replacing it with expanded Central County Fire, he kept talking about, we're going to be cutting safety net services. So not only, as a couple of members mentioned, are the dollars, of additional tax perhaps and interest, but I think you're going to have potentially a real battle just to get it mind share. People are stressed out. I used to be able to retreat and watch Bloomberg News on TV. I can't even watch that program anymore because they're talking about politics all the time. So, I mean, I wish you well, and I know you have needs and you want to do the right thing, but I don't think this is a very good time to be doing it. Sorry about that. That's my comment. Thank you.
Arnica Amble.
Arnetta Annable, a resident of District 4. I have a couple of comments. My first, most important comment is on page 6 of Exhibit H. Since this is just a draft, I would like to have you add number 12, access to Palliseau Ridge. So I'm asking for me personally, it having been one of our, I guess it's our first acquisition, and also on behalf of Kitty Monahan, who also had the driving passion, our past CAC member. In listening to the comments, I believe her name was Jessica, about how important it's going to be for us to be able to explain how the funds would be spent in a tax measure. I think if it can be broken down for estimate on how much would be administrative, how much would be operation, how much would be the urban grant program, capital improvements, and acquisition. Because I think that it's very important to keep it simple and identifiable with the public as people like myself go out to campaign for you. And I hope that the board will ultimately decide to proceed. As to the comments that were made by the prior speaker, there's always going to be other things on the ballot. So we just have to work hard to get ourselves better known and be clear about what we hope to do in the future or plan to do in the future. Then the last thing that I would like to urge on the study of if you proceed with the building square footage, is I would like to be able to see per unit of apartments, what it would represent to how many square feet are in a typical apartment, average apartment. So what would that mean in terms of increase in cost? Because I think a lot of our voters will be apartment owners, especially with all the new high density housing that's coming in and that's been ordered to be built. So I think that's going to become an important number besides what it would cost the businesses and what it will cost the homeowner. It's kind of like we're going to be tapping into a new group of residents. So I urge you to continue your work, and you'll always have my support. Thank you.
And speakers on Zoom.
If there are any members of the public on Zoom who would like to join us, or who would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand.
Okay, all right. Are you okay there?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm glad you're not photographing. I did have one other request, if I might. Is it possible to get a copy of the slideshow? Because there was a lot of important information in that I don't have the memory that Andrea has, so I need to be able to reflect that. So I would appreciate that being sent to me by email.
Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, it'll be posted on the website along with the report item after this.
Going to look and see, is that the conclude the presentation, maybe
That concludes the staff report, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Then this was not an action, this is an information item, so there's no action taken.
Actually,
Yes. We do need a motion. We go back, you were to accept the report. We need a motion to accept the report and the survey, and move forward with the survey.
Through the chair, would you like me to repeat the motion?
Well, yes.
Or I mean, it's somebody.
As a direct hint to the person that's gonna take.
It would be to approve conducting a survey of likely voters in March or April of 2025. And then there'll be a second vote to direct staff to return to the board for continued input on the draft expenditure plan and to report on the results from the voter survey.
Okay, so this soon to be maker of the motion got that, right?
I'll put that in a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Wait, are you doing that or?
Both. We do it in one motion? Okay, one motion, please.
See, I'm waiting for the screen to come up so that we can, if you wonder why something speak slowly. There we go. So we have a motion to approve conducting a survey of likely voters in March, April of 2025, and to direct staff to return to the board for continued input on the draft expenditure plan and report on the results of the voter survey. And that was made by Director Potter with a second by Director Sutherland.
Director Kennett,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Sutherland. Yes. Director Alexander,
yes.
Director Potter,
Yes.
Director Gill.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passed unanimously, and let's cross our fingers for good results. Okay. Now we are moving on to item 4, providing input on board agricultural chores for fiscal year 2025-2026.
Good evening, board. My name is Ana Regalado. I am the agricultural specialist for the Open Space Authority. So tonight, we are here to ask for your input on the scheduling and the topics of the agricultural tours for the Board of Directors in 2025 and in 2026. This picture above is actually from a farm tour that I recently took. This is a farm in Aromas. It's called Blossoms Farm. And I wanted to include it in the presentation because I think it really captures not only a beautiful view of this farm, this wonderful farm that's tucked away in the hills, but it also highlights how important it is to actually go out to the spaces that we're thinking on, that we're planning for, not only to see how operations are conducted and how the work is done in these farms and in these rangelands, but also to understand the why, right? Why it's important to protect these lands, why it's important to support the farmers and the ranchers that are on them, and why it's of benefit not only to the farmers and ranchers themselves, but also to the general public and to ourselves as well. And as many of you already know, Santa Clara Valley has a rich agricultural past and present. And over the past year, staff has heard from 2 CAC members, as well as from the board directly, that there has been a growing interest in exploring agriculture in the region, and also the ways in which we can support it through our work. And one of the ways that the authority has chosen to invest in this endeavor is by creating my position and bringing me on board to continue this work. And I'm a firm believer that one of the best ways to inform our work is by hearing directly from the folks on the ground that are growing and grazing and doing this work. And not only to hear about their experiences, but also their challenges that they might face, which is what we hope to do with these agricultural tours in 2025 and 2026. But what is also what some of you got the chance to do in October of 2024. So a little bit of background on this tour. I was unfortunately not able to attend because I wasn't on board yet. But for those of you that were, or for those of you that didn't get a chance to go, in October of 2024, the board got to tour B&T Farms and attend a food safety lecture here, as you can see in that picture in this room, to learn more about large-scale conventional agriculture and food safety overall. And this was roughly a 4-hour tour that was conducted both here, but also on site at the B&T Farms fields. And you can see some of the pictures above. And we would like to do something similar, but potentially exploring other sectors of agriculture and other topics. So some of the potential possibilities for ag tours in 2025 and 2026, this is not a comprehensive or exhaustive list. It is simply a couple of examples to get you thinking about what could be explored and what we have yet to explore. One of them is grazing and ranching, and this would be ultimately to understand the annual cycle of ranching and raising cattle and what that looks like here in Santa Clara Valley. Another option would be indoor production and post-harvest processing. So what do you do with a crop once it comes out of the field, or how do you grow crops indoors, right? Things like mushrooms or potentially microgreens or other things like that. And then another really interesting one could be exploring small and mid-scale organic production that is occurring here in the county in farms such as Spade and Plow Farms, which is here in Santa Clara County, and also exploring that organic aspect of the work, right? Not just conventional agriculture, but organic and how that differs, what opportunities and challenges that might bring as well. And as well as many more, right? Agriculture has a lot of sectors, that has a lot of different ways to grow food, to raise food. And so this is just a little bit about what could potentially be explored in the future. And now the ask is, through the chair, I'd like to ask you all to engage in a quick activity to provide your input on the tours. At your seats, there should be a small index card. And on that index card, I would like you, if you need another one, please let us know. We have a couple more that we can provide. And I would like you to go ahead and just take a couple of minutes to write down the following for these tours. So 3 topics that sound most appealing to you to explore. Again, they do not have to be the ones that I previously listed. It can include anything that you might be curious about agriculture. And it could potentially be, again, grazing. It could be row crop production, orchards. It could be organic production, small production, agritourism, anything that really piques your interest or that you would like to know more about. The next thing that I would ask you to please write down is how many tours you would like to attend in 2025. I know your time is very valuable, but we would also like to understand if you would prefer to go on 1 tour in 2025, 2, and also the same for 2026. And then I'll give you a moment to write, so I'm not rushing you through the process.
Through the chair, I just wanted to ask you, are these tours that would be also open to the CAC? Because they participated as well in the 2024 tour, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
The plan would be for them to be open to the CAC, to other committees, other members of Open Space Authority, and also hopefully the general public as well, if they would like to join.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. And then if you're all ready to move on to the next question, the final one would be to please write down the ideal tour length for you to be able to attend these tours. We recommend a minimum of a 4 to 6 hour tour, depending on the topics explored, the locations. Logistically, it takes longer to go and do a field tour. If you want to explore other topics that might be closer, such as urban agriculture, that changes things. So ideal tour length for a tour that would allow you to come out and attend and participate. And then it looks like we might be wrapping up shortly with our responses. So while you're writing down those last few comments, I would just like to invite you all one by one to go ahead and share out your thoughts and your answers to those responses so that we could provide feedback. And also I can take any questions during this time as well about the tour itself, the structure, who we might be visiting, who we've had conversations with, or if you have any concerns or comments about the tours themselves. So through the chair, I'd like to ask Director Kennett if you would like to go first in sharing your responses to the 3 questions.
The 3 I put is infrastructure that's needed to do the job. Address the business of agriculture, as well as government regulations affect what they do and the efficiency of what they do.
Thank you. And how many tours would you like to attend? Lovely. And then ideal tour length, if possible, if you have one. Ideal tour length, if you have one.
Well, to really do it right, you really need a whole day.
Yeah.
Because it's an hour or 2 or 3 hours just getting there. So if it's an 8-hour tour, you might have 4 to 5 hours to actually see what happens.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Director Kennett. Director Sutherland, would you like to share?
Thank you. I'd like something on post-harvest support. Organic farming. An example of the agritourism. I know that the CAC saw a presentation, but we never went to the site. And then, I'd like to see an example of farm worker housing. What's needed there? Soon I'll be able to do as many tours as you can provide, and forever how long. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Director Sutherland. Director Chapman.
Growing row crops indoors and outdoors. I'm a gardener myself, so I can look at techniques.
Yeah.
Distribution. Because I subscribe to the CSA, so I wanted to see how it gets out.
Yeah.
And grazing.
Perfect. And how many tours would you like to attend? Do you have an idea and their ideal length?
No, 2 a year is fine.
Perfect.
And going to Director Kennett's comment, but 4 hour of the tour itself is probably good, not including the health.
Perfect. Thank you, Director Chapman. Director Alexander.
Yes. Organic production. Going along with what Director Kennett said, challenges facing small farmers and opportunities, but what they need to get going, what support they need. And opportunities for farmers to work together, co-ops, the facility that was discussed a little while back in Morgan Hill, a place to market their goods. And 4 hours is feasible, but I understand we may need longer if there's a lot of driving time to get places. 2, maybe. Hopefully I can reduce my work hours and I'll have even more time.
Perfect. Thank you, Director Alexander. Director Potter.
Thank you. I think grazing would be great. Orchards. And then it's technically ag, but like wine and grapes.
Yeah.
As a part of the business. You got your 3. I got 1 of that. So that impacts the time, perhaps. I think 2 tours is doable, and then 3 or 4 hours. I think full day is not really possible for some.
Perfect. Thank you, Director Potter. And Director Gill.
Actually, the first one I'm thinking is organic agriculture production. So want to be understand. First, I want to be understand when we go there. So, what is the definition of organic?
do they use any kind of pesticide there, or they are totally no pesticide when they grow any kind of crops there? That's very important. The second one is a ranch. So I want to be understand how they manage the ranch, especially the grazing. So so the way the mechanism they're using, I have to be understand that. It's the best way when we have the tool there, then we can just look at that. The third thing is indoor crops like mushroom. This is very difficult to be grow, but I have to be understand the whole process, how they can do that. It's I really understand that. So this is, I have the eagerness to understand those kind of things. How many, what is how many tour you said? Every
Yes.
quarter, one,
Perfect.
easy, 4 tours.
Okay. And then do you have an
4
ideal?
hours.
4 hours?
Yeah,
Perfect.
4 hours, simple.
Perfect. Thank you, Director Gill. Thank you, directors, for your responses and your input, and for your time today. We will go ahead and collect those index cards that you had, so we have a record of what you would like to explore. And then I will work with staff and the clerk of the board to organize your first agricultural tour for you. If you have any other questions, I can take them now, but if not, I will.
I want to thank you for your interactive presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
you might want to ask if there's any.
Oh, yes. Do we have any public comment? None, okay, all right. All right. And item number 5 is to receive Open Space Authority fiscal year 2024-2025 second quarter financial work plan update for period ending December 31st, 2025.
Good evening, directors. Justina Teen, Fiscal Services Officer. Tonight, we are reporting on the second quarter of fiscal year 24-25. As usual, the first section of the work plan, the first section is the work plan status update. And by the end of the second quarter, that's the period running from October 1st to December 31st of last year, 2024. Again, we demonstrated how much we've leveraged outside funds. We completed the transfer of Laguna Seca, and we received a grant award in the amount of $5 million for continuing to protect land in Mid-Coyote Valley. We also received a grant award in the amount of $250,000 from Metropolitan Transportation Commission for the Backcountry Trail Project as well. So a lot of great accomplishments that are highlighted in the report. We've also was had the honor of honoring outgoing director Garnetta Annabelle, and then also subsequently swearing our new director, Director Sutherland, last quarter as well. And then the second section is this numbers. So by the end of the second quarter, we expended a little over 6.9 million. That is about 37% of the approved budget. And then more details are outlined in the exhibits in the profit and loss statement, budget versus actual, as well as a balance sheet. And I'm available to answer any additional questions that you might have, during your review. But the last section of the quarterly reports, it's one of our requirements. It is required by the agency's investment policy to provide monthly statements to the board. And as of the second quarter, the total market value of our investment portfolio was approximately 14.9 million. We incurred about $4,000 in management fees with Chandler Asset Management, who's our financial advisor. And overall, the portfolio is generating an average yield to maturity rate of 3.93%, and that was up from a 3.23 from last quarter. And that's a little bit of a recap of our portfolio summary. Most of our holdings are in U.S. Treasury bonds. There are restrictions to what we can hold. For example, one of the common questions, we do not hold stocks. And so a lot of bonds, either with the government or local agency. We also do hold some corporate bonds and in some asset-backed securities as well. But any questions about our financials or our work plan status?
Justine, I have a question.
Yes.
Do you know the difference between book value and cost value?
Where are we seeing that? So then the book value, let me see. Okay, so the cost value is what we actually paid. Now the book value, what happens is, I'm trying to see, that's different from the. Let me get back to you on that, Andrea. Because what happens is, I only know the difference between cost value and market value.
Okay.
So the cost value is what we actually bought it for, and we would actually book into our general ledger. But what happens is I would say outside world, the market views our securities as there's a different fair market value for it, in which we would kind of book adjustments to and report for the market value. As if that basically means if today we sold, that's how much we can get on the market. But cost value is what we actually paid for.
Okay, thank you.
But I'll look into the book value one.
A quick question or comment, really. As looking through this list, I saw a number of our largest Santa Clara County area corporate citizens. But I think we should remind them that we're purchasers of their bonds when we go out and meet with them and talk about other things. Just put it out there.
Okay.
Director Gill, any questions?
No,
No?
I think it's a net asset value.
Thank you.
Value.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Questions? I don't see any more questions. Thank you. And do we have any public comment? All right, we are now on to committee meetings summary, Citizens Advisory Committee. Director Sutherland.
Thank you, Director. A couple of things that I wanted to highlight for the last CAC meeting is that Mayor Burton and Lanny Wong Bissett have been selected to be chair and vice chair. And so the ladies are just gonna, great, work with them for a while. And then the CAC also received the presentation on the new website. They had a lot of questions because they hadn't had it. And so it was watching them engage, I thought was really just a great example of how engaged they are and they're asking all the good questions. And then I guess the other one that you've already heard is that Steve Mink will not be returning to the CAC. Those are good. It is. Thank you.
Yeah. With that, and then Land Use and Stewardship Committee.
We did meet, and I was just scrambling to look at the agenda to remind myself the terrific meeting we had. But Blair Trails, yes. We had a great conversation about the Blair Trail. And what was that? It's got a different name. That's what
The Rancho Canadador Regional Trail.
that's what messed me up. It didn't say Blair in the meeting, but anyway. Just like we renamed the committee and we have a different name for the trail, but it's moving forward and looking good. But we got some good things.
Would staff like to?
Staff could enhance my remarks, that'd be great.
Sure, I would throw them all. I was gonna.
Apologies through the chair. Yeah, I'll just give my update now. Yeah, we presented, like Director Potter said, to the Land Use Stewardship Committee on February 13th, Liz Westbrook with Xander Westbrook Landscape Architects, or Trails Planner, I'll call Trails Planners, and Associate Open Space Planner Jennifer Path presented the project. And we're also currently in the process of doing some public outreach and engagement. We had a couple of days where we were out on, at the preserve in the parking lot doing our volunteer programs administrator, Gavin Comstock, coordinated, with volunteers out there, engaging with the public and got some survey results. And last I heard from our public information officer, Charlotte Graham, we had over 100 responses or 500 responses to our online survey, which we also sent outreach out and via our website. So we're receiving some really great public input and interest in the project.
Good, definitely.
And the possibility of backcountry campsites on the property as well.
I did a slight test because, we're switching, ignoring Twitter these days. And Blue Sky is now an option, so I posted a survey on Blue Sky just to see. All right,
Thank you.
yeah.
That was my.
What a wonderful.
Much better. Thank you.
All right, so now we are on to General Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I just want to thank the board for your attention tonight. It was some meaty topics. And I want to thank Anna for an inaugural presentation that went very well to the board. Thank you for that. Lucas, before I turn it over to Megan, Lucas, do you have any, is there a report on the date for the Bay Area Ridge Trail dedication yet at Rancho?
Yeah, the date is set for May 30th.
Okay.
Yeah.
What time of day is it going to be doing?
I believe it's in the morning, probably
I believe 10 a.m.
10 a.m., yeah.
Okay, so it'd be wonderful to see board members there. We're inviting a number of guests and some elected officials, and would love to see board member participation there. And with that, Megan, take it away.
Thank you. Wanted to give a brief update on several things happening at the federal level. I'm sure you've been following the news and tracking many events. So I want to focus particularly on funding as it relates to things that we're looking at. Just briefly, of course, it's been a whirlwind. We know there's the original executive order and the Office of Management and Budget, OMB's original memo directed a freeze on various financial assistance pots. There was a later clarification that from OMB that the freeze was really limited to suspending on specific things like DEI. So they were changing the pot, changing which things were frozen. And then, of course, the DC Circuit Court ruled that there was a hold on the freeze. So things are still working out what's going to happen. Yeah. But in terms of for ourselves, what we're watching in the future, of course, are the updates to this freeze and what happens with DEI and other language changes to policy as well as funding. The state and the content of the upcoming, they call them NOFOs, Notice of Funding Opportunities at the federal level, grant solicitations, how much funding is available, what the requirements are. We do expect them to probably be changing, as well as cuts to those grant programs and various entitlement programs. We've worked with our consultants in DC, Townsend Public Affairs, closely, giving them, for example, lists of federal funding sources that we track closely and are interested in, either have used before or would be in the future, to help coordinate what we can do to, work on keeping funding available there. And lastly, just want to mention that Mark Landgraf and I will be going to DC at the end of March for our annual trip to meet with our elected, Congress members, and we continue to build on those relationships, as well as, of course, talk about the OSA's work and these issues and questions we might have about everything going on. Oh, I guess I should also mention specifically our current 2 federal grants. One is from HUD and one is from FEMA. The FEMA is one that actually the board authorized tonight for us to go through that grant agreement. What we've heard at the current moment is that those are both safe, that those will continue. There may be delays, but that they will be coming to us.
Thanks, Megan. Any other members of the management team?
Good evening, Board of Directors. Aaron Aber, Natural Resources Manager. Just to few updates. Today I had the pleasure of getting a little early preview of Iona Yakima Coyote Ridge. As you know, we're gearing up for wildflower season, and I was pleased to see our wonderful field staff and our grazing tenant are currently performing a flash grazing of the Gateway property. So Justin's put his cows in there. I think there's some 50, 60 of them or something like that. And the perimeter of the nice built things that we all paid for is fenced with electrical temporary fencing, and his cattle are doing good work in there. So that was really nice to see. Andres and his team have really helped beautify the Gateway. So you'll see some wonderful wildflowers as you enter. It's just a great aesthetic experience, and I hope you encourage folks, your constituents, to get out this spring. Next, I'll say I have the pleasure of representing OSA in our partnership project with Peninsula Open Space Trust on the Highway 101 and Monterey Road wildlife crossing studies. So Post has recently completed their Highway 101 assessment, sort of early conceptual assessment of the crossing structures there. So they've really looked at a very long stretch of 101. There's undercrossings, there's a few bridges on 101. It's a pretty long stretch. So more creation, more ideation is needed to sort of determine a best path forward, because it's like 30 different locations, right? It's quite a big stretch. Whereas conversely, at Monterey, there are 3 identified wildlife crossing locations, and I think you've seen some of those. They are now in the process of initiating the project with Valley Transportation Agency as the sort of implementing agency for that. So we're helping them to make that happen and move those forward. Last, I'll report that Mark and I have been attending a sort of ad hoc statewide working group of folks who are interested in agricultural mitigation. Santa Clara County, as the board knows, is in the process of developing a proposed agricultural mitigation plan for development. Many other counties in the state have gone through this. Some of them are about 20 or 25 years old. And this working group is a body to share the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we hope to use this group to learn more and engage more fully with the county process.
Thanks, Erin. Elizabeth?
Good evening, directors. Elizabeth Loretto, Administrative Operations Manager, with our favorite updates, recruitments, and new hires. We have 2 active recruitments now, our communications intern and seasonal open space aides. They are still open through Friday. Both have about 60 applicants so far, so get your friends to send their people over. We always want more. But we also have an accounting intern coming shortly behind those. And we're very excited. I'm surprised Lucas didn't include this in his update, to share that on Monday, we have a new associate open space planner starting with us, Thea Yang, who is a landscape architect by trade, and we're going to be very excited to get you guys to meet her in coming months. And then we also believe you all are aware that our equipment mechanic operator, Dave Tharp, has made his retirement plans known. Yes, he'll be retiring early July, and we have a new equipment mechanic operator starting later in March, Dan Chamberlain. So again, excited to get you guys meeting our new people. And we have had some attrition, and we'll have some upcoming recruitments to fill vacancies. So thank you.
Good evening, directors. Nick Perry, Long Range Planning Manager. Just a quick update, a preview of coming attractions, but we're almost done with our RFP process, request for proposals process, to bring on new consultants for Coyote Valley, interviewing some firms tomorrow and next Wednesday, and hope to have some great recommendations to make to the board at our next meeting. So looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Legal counsel.
Report, Madam Chair.
All right. Board member reports. Director
Lord,
Gill.
Lord.
Director Potter.
Sure. Thank you. So this is a complicated thing, but it is shouldn't be too much of a surprise to the community that my significant other has started a job in Albuquerque, New Mexico in November. And so once we get our house rented out, I will be residing outside of my district. So in the coming months, I'm not done remodeling. So as we work towards a process to fill our dearly departed colleague's seat, we might need to also include District 6. So I just thought I would mention that, but I'll be at the next couple meetings. This is my bummer report, sorry.
Yeah. Good news, please.
No report, but I hope your remodeling takes a long time.
Okay, I have a report from LAFCO. So Mark Turner was appointed from the Cities Association, so he's now a LAFCO member. He was an alternate, he's now a commissioner. Zach Hilton was appointed from the Cities Commission as an alternate commissioner. There was a combination given to outgoing Commissioner Russ Milton for his service. He has now left LAFCO. Alternate Commissioners Chapman, Campos, and O'Neill were approved to serve on the Ad hoc Finance Committee, which I think is meeting next month. There was a report from Nalima about some concerns of instability with CalLAFCO. And then there's also some concerns with South County, the contract between the consolidation recommended for our fire service review. So that came up the last meeting. On Monday is the special districts meeting, and Nalima is going to report out on some of the CalLAFCO concerns. There's also going to be an org where I have thrown my name to be the chair of the special districts committee. I don't know vice chair because I don't know who I have pointed out from other places to be on the special districts. And there will be a report at my request on legislative activity based on all the things that are going on in the federal government and how those affect the special districts. So tune in for that. They are going to be doing a special presentation on that. That's my report.
Thank you, Drew. Just to give a quick report out, on February 1st, I attended Patrick Aaron's Policy and Pancakes, just for the first few minutes to pass out brochures about the Open Space Authority, and everybody asked them how they feel about open space, and everybody says, oh, I love open space. I said, well, thank you, it's only $24 a year. Which always reinforces to people that they are paying for it, but they do appreciate it. They have no idea if it's mid-pen or OSA property, and it really doesn't matter. They're out there enjoying themselves. And then on February 5th, I attended the Santa Clara County Parks Commission meeting and just announced the new website.
Quick report of my first summer of the year. If you want to fly halfway around the world and look for culture shock, don't go to Australia. They dress like we do. McDonald's is right down the street from KFC. They talk funny, they drive in the wrong side of the road. But I spend a lot of time in nature preserves. I mean, they really are into it, and they're not all government funded. Every little town seems to have their own appreciation of open space. The spiders about the size of my hand. The flora and fauna is like anywhere else in the world. So we went to several parts, and it was a blast. Welcome back.
Yeah. Okay, this is the part of the meeting. If I could just ask your indulgence that we take a moment of silence, adjourn the meeting in honor of Director Falker. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
We're gonna have no mics on the board.